Picture a world blanketed in white. The sun sets early, painting the snow in shades of lavender and blue. Somewhere in the distance, smoke rises from a chimney, a thin ribbon against the darkening sky. This is winter at its most profound, a season that has shaped life on Earth for millions of years. Tonight, we'll journey through the quiet mysteries of winter. We'll discover how creatures great and small surrender to sleep beneath the frost, and how human communities, nestled in mountain valleys, have learned not just to survive the cold, but to thrive within it. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the snow fall softly around our story. Chapter 1. The Great Sleep. The architecture of hibernation. Deep beneath the frozen ground, in chambers lined with grass and leaves, a woodchuck's heart beats just 5 times per minute. In summer, that same heart pounded 80 times each minute. The woodchuck's body temperature has dropped from 98 degrees to barely above freezing, sometimes as low as 37 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't sleep as we know it. This is hibernation, one of nature's most extraordinary survival strategies. The word hibernation comes from the Latin hibernare, meaning to pass the winter. But what's happening inside a hibernating animal is far more remarkable than simply sleeping through the cold months. The biochemical miracle. Consider the Arctic ground squirrel living in the far north where winter temperatures plunge to 40 below zero. This small creature, weighing less than a pound, achieves something that seems impossible. It supercools its body to below freezing, around 26 degrees Fahrenheit, without dying. How? Scientists have discovered that hibernating animals produce special proteins that act like antifreeze in their blood. Their cells reorganize, protecting vital organs even as metabolic processes slow to barely measurable levels. A hibernating bear's metabolism drops by 75%. It won't eat, drink, urinate, or defecate for up to 7 months. The bear's secret. Black bears, despite their deep winter sleep, aren't true hibernators in the scientific sense. Their body temperature drops only slightly, from about 100 degrees to around 88 degrees. Yet they maintain this state for months, living entirely off their fat reserves. A bear preparing for winter must consume 20,000 calories per day in autumn. That's roughly 40 times what an average human eats. They gain up to 30 pounds per week, building the fat layer that will sustain them through winter's darkness. Inside the den, something miraculous happens. A pregnant bear gives birth during hibernation, usually to twins, each weighing less than a pound, about the size of a hamster. The cubs nurse and grow while their mother remains in her dormant state, her body somehow knowing to wake just enough to care for her newborns before drifting back into torpor. The dormouse's dream. In European woodlands, the dormouse takes hibernation to extraordinary lengths. This tiny creature, weighing barely an ounce, may sleep for 7 months or more. The Romans were so fascinated by dormice that they kept them in special jars called dolia, fattening them on chestnuts and acorns. During hibernation, a dormouse's breathing slows dramatically, sometimes just one breath every several minutes. Its body temperature matches the surrounding air, sometimes dropping to just above freezing. The dormouse curls into a perfect ball, its bushy tail wrapped around its body like a blanket. Here's a fascinating detail. Dormice in warmer climates hibernate for shorter periods, while those in colder regions may sleep for 8 months or more. They're calibrated to their environment with astonishing precision. Bats in the darkness. In caves and abandoned mines, millions of bats clustered together, hanging upside down in the darkness. Little brown bats, common across North America, enter a state so profound that they appear dead. Their heart rate drops from over 1,000 beats per minute to just 25. They take one breath every 2 hours. Bats have evolved to hibernate communally, clustering in specific hibernacula, places with just the right temperature and humidity. Too cold and they freeze. Too warm and they burn through their fat reserves too quickly. The ideal temperature hovers around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But here's the mystery that has puzzled scientists. Periodically during winter, bats wake up. These arousals are expensive. Each one costs a bat week's worth of stored energy. Yet they continue to do it. Why? Some researchers believe it's to allow their immune systems to function, fighting off infections that could overwhelm a completely dormant body. Others think it's to restore neural connections that degrade during prolonged unconsciousness. The frog that freezes solid. In the leaf litter of northern forests, would frogs experience something that seems like death itself? As temperatures drop, ice crystals form in their bodies. Their hearts stop beating. Their blood stops flowing. Up to 70% of their body water turns to ice. Yet come spring, they thaw and hop away, perfectly healthy. The wood frog's survival depends on a remarkable adaptation. As freezing begins, their liver floods their system with glucose, turning their cells into a syrupy solution that protects vital organs from ice damage. The glucose acts like antifreeze, preventing ice crystals from puncturing cell membranes. Simultaneously, the frog produces special proteins that control where ice forms, keeping it in less critical spaces between cells rather than inside them. For months, these frogs remain frozen. No heartbeat, no breathing, no brain activity, in a state that blurs the line between life and death. Yet something inside them knows to wait, knows that warmth will return. Chapter 2: Mountain Villages in Winter. The geography of isolation. High in the Alps, the Pyrenees, the Himalayas, and countless other mountain ranges, small villages have existed for centuries, built in valleys and on slopes that become completely cut off from the outside world each winter. Consider the village of Zermatt in Switzerland. Until 1927, this community was accessible only by foot or mule track. Each autumn, as the first heavy snows arrived, the village would be sealed off from the rest of civilization for months at a time. The people who lived there developed a culture entirely shaped by this seasonal isolation. Or think of the villages in Norway's western fjords, where winter brings not just snow, but also months of near total darkness. In places like Rajukin, the sun disappears behind the mountains from September to March. The villagers wouldn't see direct sunlight for half the year. Preparing for the long dark. In traditional mountain communities, autumn was a time of intense activity. Everything needed for survival had to be gathered, made, or stored before the snows came. Food preservation was an art form. Meat was salted, smoked, or dried. Vegetables were pickled in ceramic crocks. Cheese was made from the summer's milk and stored in cool cellars. Grain was milled into flour and kept in sealed containers away from moisture and pests. In the Pyrenees, villagers would smoke entire hams in specially designed chimneys, the meat hanging in the aromatic smoke of oak and beech wood for weeks. These hams could last the entire winter, providing precious protein when fresh food was impossible to obtain. Root cellars were engineering marvels. Dug deep into hillsides or beneath houses, they maintained temperatures just above freezing, cold enough to preserve food, but warm enough to prevent it from freezing solid. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, and apples would be layered in sand or straw, each layer separated to prevent rot from spreading. The warmth of wood. Firewood was currency in mountain villages. A family's woodpile, visible outside every home, indicated their wealth and preparedness. Cutting and stacking wood for winter was a community affair, often involving elaborate systems of shared labor. In Scandinavian villages, they had a saying, "Wood warms you twice, once when you cut it and once when you burn it." But the reality was more complex. Good firewood required knowledge passed down through generations. Oak burned hot, but was hard to split. Birch lit easily and smelled sweet. Pine contained resin that could cause dangerous chimney fires if not properly managed. The village of End in Austria's Ötztal Alps has maintained traditional stone houses with thick walls and small windows for centuries. These architectural choices weren't aesthetic. They were survival. Thick walls of stone or log absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night. Small windows minimize heat loss. The entire family often slept in one room, sometimes with livestock in an attached stable below, their body heat rising through the floor. The stube, heart of the home. In alpine villages, the most important room was the stube, a wood-paneled chamber dominated by a massive ceramic stove called a cachalofen. These stoves, often weighing several tons, were masterpieces of thermal engineering. Here's how they worked. The firebox was actually in an adjacent room, off in the kitchen. Smoke and heat traveled through channels inside the stove's ceramic body, warming the entire mass before exiting through the chimney. Once heated, these stoves would radiate warmth for 12 to 24 hours, requiring only 1 or 2 firings per day, even in the depths of winter. The stube was where life happened in winter. Women spun wool and mended clothes. Men carved wood and repaired tools. Children learned their letters. Elders told stories. The entire social world contracted to this warm, dimly lit room, illuminated by tallow candles or oil lamps. Avalanche villages. Some mountain communities lived under constant threat from avalanches. In Switzerland's Valais region, entire villages were positioned and designed around this danger. Churches were built with massively thick walls on the uphill side, designed to split avalanches and protect the houses below. The village of Obergesteln has a church specifically positioned to protect the rest of the village. For centuries, villagers maintained this positioning, even rebuilding in the same spot after avalanches struck. They understood snow patterns with scientific precision born of necessity. Some villages built avalanche walls, stone structures or earth berms positioned to deflect sliding snow. Others used forests as protection, never cutting certain slopes because they knew the trees held the snowpack in place. This ecological knowledge, developed over generations, represented sophisticated engineering without formal training. The art of snow reading. Mountain people developed an intimate relationship with snow. They had dozens of words for different types: powder snow, wet snow, wind-packed snow, corn snow, sugar snow. Each type behaved differently, signaled different dangers, and required different strategies for travel. In the Himalayas, Sherpa communities could predict avalanches by listening to the snowpack. Certain creaking sounds meant instability. They could look at a slope and know, from the angle, the type of snow and the wind patterns, whether it was safe to cross. Travel in winter required skis or snowshoes, each village developing its own design suited to local conditions. In Scandinavia, skis have been used for over 4,000 years, not for sport, but for survival. Letters between villages were carried by ski messengers who knew every path and shortcut, traveling by moonlight when necessary. Community bonds. Isolation forged deep community connections. In the Bavarian Alps, the tradition of Stubentans emerged, winter gatherings where villagers would move from house to house, bringing music, food, and news. These weren't mere social events. They were psychological survival mechanisms, preventing the depression and madness that could come from months of isolation. Villages maintained detailed records of who needed help. Widows, the elderly, the sick. The community knew everyone's circumstances. Firewood would appear mysteriously at the homes of those who couldn't cut their own. Food was shared without elaborate acknowledgement. This wasn't charity in the modern sense. It was a recognition that in winter, survival was collective. Midwife's path. In every mountain village, the midwife held special status. Babies, inconveniently, arrive in all seasons. A midwife might have to ski for miles through a blizzard to reach a woman in labor. These journeys were so dangerous that midwives often had special privileges: the best firewood, help with their own work, in recognition of the risks they took for the community. Stories circulated of legendary midwives who knew every path by feel alone, who could navigate in total darkness or whiteout conditions, guided by an almost supernatural sense of direction. Winter crafts. Long winter nights gave birth to extraordinary craftwork. In the Alps, wood carving reached levels of incredible intricacy. Men would spend entire winters carving a single piece, a clock, a chest, or a religious scene, using only hand tools by firelight. Women developed textile arts of stunning complexity. In Iceland, whole families would gather for cold vodka. Evening gatherings where one person would read aloud while others spun wool, knitted, or wove. An Icelandic sweater with its intricate patterns wasn't just clothing. It was a record of hundreds of hours of winter work, each pattern carrying meaning and tradition. Lace making in alpine villages became so refined that it supported entire communities. In the cold months when agricultural work was impossible, women would create lace of extraordinary delicacy by candlelight. Their work eventually sought after across Europe. Chapter 3: The Science of Staying Warm. Human cold adaptation. While we can't hibernate, humans have developed remarkable adaptations to cold. The Sami people in northern Scandinavia, for generations living above the Arctic Circle, show measurable physiological differences in circulation and metabolic response to cold. Studies of traditional mountain peoples reveal higher basal metabolic rates. Their bodies naturally produce more heat. Their blood vessels constrict less aggressively in cold, maintaining better circulation to extremities. This isn't genetic destiny, but rather a developmental adaptation. Children raised in cold environments develop these traits, their bodies learning efficient cold management. The Sherpas of Nepal show extraordinary cold tolerance, partly due to genetic adaptations related to oxygen use and energy metabolism, but also through cultural practices. Their traditional diet, high in buttered tea and roasted barley flour, provides dense calories needed for thermoregulation at altitude. The physics of warmth. Heat leaves the body through four main pathways: radiation, conduction, convection, and evaporation. Traditional cold weather clothing addressed all four with remarkable sophistication. Multiple layers trap air, and air is an excellent insulator. Inuit parkas use 2 layers of fur, with the hairs facing in opposite directions, creating an insulating dead air space. The outer layer shed wind and snow. The inner layer trapped warmth. Animal fats played a crucial role. Lanolin in wool repels water while retaining warmth. Mountain people would sometimes wear unwashed wool, the natural oils providing weather resistance. Leather boots were treated with animal fat, creating waterproof barriers. Fire technology. The evolution of fire management in cold climates represents sophisticated technology. A simple fire radiates heat in all directions, mostly wasted. Mountain peoples develop reflector walls, built behind fires to direct heat forward. Some communities built stone or earth ovens that captured heat mass, radiating warmth long after the fire died. The Finnish sauna tradition, ancient beyond record, represents advanced understanding of heat storage. Rocks were heated for hours, then water applied to create steam. The heated stones would maintain warmth for entire evenings, and the building itself, heavily insulated, retained heat remarkably well. Nutrition and cold. The human body burns significantly more calories in cold, sometimes double or triple normal requirements. Traditional winter diets in cold climates were extraordinarily calorie-dense. Pemmican, used by Native American tribes and later by Arctic explorers, combined dried meat, rendered fat, and berries into a food that was 50% fat by weight. A small amount provided enormous energy. Similar preparations existed worldwide. Mongolian dried curd with fat, Tibetan sample with butter, Scandinavian preserved meats in lard. These weren't primitive foods. They were precisely engineered survival nutrition, developed through centuries of trial and observation. Chapter 4: Winter's Quiet Wisdom. The Psychology of Winter. There's a particular quality to winter consciousness. The long nights, the muffled silence of snow, the inward turning. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They reflect real psychological and neurological changes. Reduced daylight affects human brain chemistry. Melatonin production increases, creating natural drowsiness. Serotonin levels can drop, affecting mood. Yet traditional winter cultures often showed remarkable psychological resilience. Why? Partly it's expectation. If winter isolation is normal and anticipated, it doesn't create the stress of modern seasonal affective disorder. There were rhythms, rituals, and structure, but there's also something deeper. Winter forced contemplation. There was time, vast expanses of it. Time to think, to remember, to imagine. Many of humanity's great philosophical and spiritual traditions emerged from or refined during long winters. The storytelling season. Winter was when stories lived. In Norwegian mountain villages, the Venter, fairy tales, were specifically winter entertainment. These weren't children's stories, but complex narratives carrying cultural knowledge, moral teaching, and practical wisdom disguised as fantasy. A story about a traveler who leaves the path and gets lost might really be teaching navigation skills and the dangers of overconfidence in snow. A tale about a family that shares food with a stranger who later saves them encodes a survival value of generosity. Icelandic sagas, those intricate chronicles of families and feuds, were composed in winter and recited during endless dark nights. Memory was a technology. People could recite hours of complex narrative from recall. Natural rhythms. Modern life has disconnected us from seasonal cycles. We maintain the same schedule year-round, eating the same foods, maintaining the same temperature indoors, but our biology carries deep memory of different patterns. Hunter-gatherer societies and traditional agricultural communities naturally slowed in winter. There was less that could be done. This wasn't laziness, it was efficiency. Conserve energy when food is scarce and work is limited. Rest, repair, prepare. Some researchers suggest that our modern resistance to these rhythms contributes to winter depression. We fight biology instead of flowing with it. The silence of snow. Snow absorbs sound. A fresh snowfall can reduce noise pollution by up to 60%. This acoustic dampening creates the peculiar silence of winter nights. A quiet so profound becomes almost tangible. In this silence, mountain villagers reported heightened awareness. Small sounds, the crack of ice, the movement of an animal, the distant ring of a church bell, carried significance. People developed acute hearing, able to distinguish different footsteps in snow, to judge temperature by the sound of their own breathing. This sensory sharpening wasn't mystical. It was necessary. Information was scarce, so awareness had to be keen. Proof barriers. Closing meditation. As our journey through winter draws to close, imagine yourself in that mountain village. Snow falling softly outside. A warm stove radiates heat. Somewhere, a woodchuck sleeps beneath the frost, its heart barely beating. A frozen frog waits for spring, ice crystals suspended in its cells. These aren't separate stories. They're all part of winter's wisdom. The knowledge that darkness and cold aren't enemies to be conquered, but seasons to be understood, respected, and even embraced. The hibernating animals teach us about the power of rest, of surrender, of trusting in cycles. The mountain villagers teach us about community, preparation, and resilience. Together, they remind us that winter, despite its harshness, has always been a season of survival and even beauty. The snow continues falling outside this imagined window. The fire crackles. And somewhere deep in the earth, spring waits, not as a rescue from winter, but as winter's promised completion. Rest well. The winter hearth keeps its watch.